And joining me live now, Democratic Congresswoman Jackie Speier of California, a member of the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committee. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me yet again.
Thank you, Tamara. It's great to be with you.
We heard a barrage of people with their ideas on what they would do if elected in defeating ISIS. But I do want to note something of importance. So from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, she said her plan for ISIS would be a new phase in the war, embracing some ideas offered by Republican presidential candidates and rejecting some by President Obama. And those include no-fly zones in Syria, more U.S. commandos in Syria, and arming Kurdish fighters. What do you make of what it seems as a tag team from both sides, all criticizing the president in this administration?
There's no question that we underestimated ISIL. It is a very complex environment in which they are operating. The greatest success has been by the Kurds. And the one thing we should have learned, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, if the people that live there are not engaged in the battle, if the countries surrounding the areas in which the battles are taking place are not engaged, then us coming in and, quote, defeating them is not going to be a successful strategy. So a coalition of forces, not just from Europe, but the surrounding Middle East countries, have to be part of the solution here. Just putting more men and women at risk on the ground in Syria and Iraq is not going to give us victory. Arming and securing more weaponry for the Kurds and others who want to engage in the fight is very critical.
As I mentioned, you're a member of the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committee, so when you say that ISIS was underestimated, as you can imagine, people at home are wondering how is that possible. You also have this report out that the Pentagon's Inspector General is looking into whether analysts at U.S. Central Command was ordered to make changes to intelligence estimates about ISIS to present a better picture of American accomplishments. So at this point, how was it possible, is it possible, that ISIS was underestimated?
Well, I think we underestimated them 2 years ago. More recently, the intelligence community, I think, has provided much more accurate assessments. But CENTCOM, which is the area that is responsible for the Middle East, has, for whatever reasons, know yet why, has dumbed down the intelligence, has sweetened it, has made it seem like we are being more successful there than we are. And I'm very concerned about the whistleblower. I've sent a letter to General Austin making sure that this whistleblower is not retaliated against. I've also joined in a bipartisan letter asking for climate surveys, because I want to know how widespread it is that the analysts don't feel that their information is being properly vetted up the chain. And when the president isn't getting in his daily briefings unvarnished information, then we've got a serious problem.
Absolutely. And to your point, one of the allegations is that the analysts went to the Inspector General claiming to have evidence that superiors had doctored the reports to show greater progress from the U.S. airstrikes. What would be the motivation there? As you pointed out, we do not know, and the pieces are still falling in place. But with your position, your key position on this committee, what would be the motivation?
Well, I don't know what the motivation is. I can only surmise. You know, sometimes generals are interested in getting promoted more than anything else. So if they can make things look better than they are, they see that as maybe a step in getting that next star. I'm totally speculating here.
Sure.
I don't know what the answer is, but I'm deeply troubled by what I believe is doctoring that has taken place and has created an impression that we are doing better there than we actually are.
And lastly, I have to ask you about the fact that here you have President Obama planning to meet with France's President Hollande, and perhaps a big push from the UK now, its prime minister, to increase its role in these airstrikes. Nevertheless, the brunt of this, the expectations of what to do about ISIS, falls on the shoulders of the United States. When people talk about the strategy to defeat ISIS, it pivots directly to the United States. What's your assessment of that and a possibility of forming a coalition?
Well, I think we have to form a coalition. I think the European countries recognize now that they are, deeply impacted by ISIS and the Middle East in general. The truth of the matter is, if you look around the world, we have the largest military force with the exception of China. All the European countries are really quite small, 150,000. The largest, frankly, is in Turkey with about 600,000 troops. But in the end, General Dempsey has said it over and over again. You start a war at sea and in the air, and you complete the war on the ground. But again, we cannot repeat Iraq and Afghanistan because in both those settings, we have not been successful. And I think that we've got to make sure the Middle East countries are very engaged.
Congresswoman Jackie Speier, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And as mentioned,